Well, thank you for coming to the meeting, everyone. This is the July 30th meeting of the Intermunicipal Task Force. My name is John Mugno, and together with Michael Polar, we are the co-chairs of the task force. I sent around an email with an agenda for today's meeting, and there'll be an opportunity at the end for people to add any other topics that I may have overlooked. The first topic is the update on the terminal use agreement resolution. I know it's been passed by the legislatures of Rye Town, City of Rye, and the Village of Rye Brook. Is there any other municipality that's passed the resolution?
Yeah, I can speak to that, John. First of all, it's Michael Pollack is my last name.
Pollack, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Pollack for the record, from the town of North Castle. The town of North Castle passed the resolution on July 24th. I can get you a copy of the certified resolution. There's some trepidation over the recommendation over the TUA and having the staggered expiration dates over the TUA. I think the sentiment there is that that's a judgment call. And it's kind of a speculative, judgment call that there's increased leverage on the part of the airport by having staggered expiration dates when, in fact, the opposite could be true.
Mhm.
So I think that the feeling there is that recommendation is one, that perhaps we should be careful about. If it's if it's worked for a number of years, and if it's not broke, don't fix it. So I think that, for this task force to be making judgment calls of that nature, on our own, the board adopted it. But like I said, I think there's some trepidation about the task force, making judgment calls of that nature, particularly on its own. So I'll get you a copy. Peter, that's all factual. You don't have to respond. It's just that that's the comment that I would add. And they did adopt it, but that's the one area of concern. And I also think going forward, that's something we should be careful about.
Yeah, no, all good points. I think, however, Martha, if I recall, you're talking about point recommendation number 2, I think it is, Michael. And I think, Martha, that language was softened to just say the county should consider that, as I recall. Unfortunately, I'm not at home and I don't have the document in front of me.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull it up. I think that is the case. We did discuss that.
Okay.
So look, I just want to say that there was a bunch of confusion verging on misinformation being stated at that meeting. The one thing we know right now.
Which meeting are you referencing, Peter?
The Westchester County Airport Advisory Board meeting.
I'm talking about the North Castle I'm talking about the North Castle Town Board, Peter. I'm talking about the Airport Advisory Board.
All right. Well, I think we should probably just share with the group quick synopsis of the AAB. I'll leave it to you.
Let's get into that later, Peter. I was just reporting on the status of the adoption of that one item on the platform, and it can lead to maybe that's a larger discussion we should have later. But let's efficiently at least get through this point on John's agenda.
Yeah. And I think, in fact, that it was recognized as controversial, and that's why the language was softened to this should be considered. Now, may not have been softened enough for in some people's view, but that was, I believe, Martha, the thinking behind the wording that eventually emerged.
Yes, it doesn't, I think in a couple cases we said it's up to the legislature to determine the final details of that. These were just recommendations, obviously. They're not,
Right.
cast in concrete at all. So the county may see to go a different way, and that's perfectly fine with all these recommendations, right? This is just our, from our standpoint, our viewpoint, what we think may work the best. Well, their
Okay.
minds may disagree, right?
Well, again, a recommendation, on something that's a judgment call of that nature is still a recommendation of this body.
Yeah.
So I think we have to be careful about that.
Yeah, point taken.
It's definitely something that should be considered, whether it makes sense to do that or not. There may be reasons it doesn't, right?
Well, but then
Peter
this-
felt strongly that there were
force-
reasons enough to include it.
But this task force should study those before they make that recommendation.
Right, but
Yeah,
our general consensus was that that it did make sense. So we, if they have other information or it doesn't make sense, that's certainly within their power to change it.
Well, I think
Yeah.
It was our consensus. We voted on this, that it made sense to
No, I
include that
agree.
recommendation.
I'm just saying that was the one that was, that met with some pause.
Yeah, but I think this raises a process question because Martha distributed the draft. There were what must have been more than one draft, the draft memos, and then the final memo or final draft for comment. And I think we left it open for comment
Yeah.
for a couple of days at least.
Mhm.
But I don't
Yeah.
think you got too many comments back.
No,
Not on that one. No.
I agree. I think it's a process point.
Okay, good. But I think though.
yeah, also, I think we need to recognize that, number one, we're not a technical body. It's not our responsibility to thoroughly research all the technical feasibility of everything that we discuss, okay? It's just not. I mean, that's not the purpose of, our purpose is to, in terms of broader policy, identify issues of concern that we share, bring possible solutions that meet the that appear to meet the overall needs of our communities to the attention of the decision makers and those with the resources and expertise to vet them. Do we want to obviously pick out crazy pie in the sky type ideas? No, but it is also not our responsibility to technically vet everything. And I think that Martha was careful in the language that she chose and that the rest of us signed off on and considered. We were not dictating specific solutions to anybody. Not that we're in a position to dictate, obviously, but we weren't spelling out that, things need to be this. We identified a problem with the way the current agreements are set up. We suggested a solution, and the rest is up to the decision makers. But at least they have a sense of what our concerns are. And I will just quickly say that it's also not our job to tell the county only what it wants to hear. I mean, it's arguably more important for us to weigh in on things that the county might just assume sidestep, or things that the county has hesitations about, because that's where we have the ability to impact the direction that things go. And again, they may not choose to heed all of our advice, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be willing to give it.
Look,
Well, I have a
that's
several-fold
fine.
response to that.
Oh, sorry, Michael.
I have a several-fold response. First of all, I really respect and admire the work that Martha's done and that she's put into it. And I appreciate the time commitment and sacrifice that she's made. So Martha, please, nothing but hats off to you and appreciation, okay, for what you've done. Number one.
Thank you.
No, really, no, thank you. Number two is you know, to say we're not responsible for investigating our recommendations, well, that just depends upon how seriously you want your recommendations to be taken. So, you know, if that's going to be the way we're going to operate, then we should have a lot of disclaimers on our recommendations. You know, number three, I think a recommendation of that nature has the potential to backfire. So to make a recommendation of that nature, I think there are a lot of counter arguments that can be made that says that to stagger the expiration dates makes the county more vulnerable, because now any one airline that chooses not to go along effectively has veto rights by itself. And we haven't explored that at all. And yet we, you know, made a recommendation just based upon the, you know, the discussions among the, I count 11 tiles, you know, on this Zoom call. And I just don't think that for us to make recommendations, you know, based upon our, of that magnitude, especially, you know, based upon just these internal discussions, I don't think that's wise or that serves anyone well.
Well, when we send this to the county, why can't we include a preamble that says these are just based on our observations? We had no research staff to dig into these in any specific detail. We are limited by time. Obviously, we wanted to get this in their hands as soon as possible. So these were our, as a group, observations and recommendations that we had, but that we leave it to them and their experience and judgment as to which of the recommendations are most workable.
Yeah, and
We can
perhaps,
add
yeah,
that to the package of resolutions that go to them so that it's
Yeah.
clear these are not dictated items that we expect them to follow.
yeah, and perhaps consultation, you know, you know, with the trained, you know, staff professionals that have access to the, you know, to the data and live
Right.
with it on a daily basis.
Exactly.
So how many towns, again, pardon me, this is,
Yeah.
I've been unable to attend most of the meetings, but how many towns have actually signed off? How many are outstanding? And are
Well,
we
four.
getting going to get comments similar to the ones we got from North Castle, or different comments from these other towns?
The other three others have approved, as I mentioned. Rye Town, the city of Rye, and Rye Brook. And none of those had comments like North Castle had. We're
Mhm.
still waiting on Portchester, Newcastle, and Greenwich. And one of the issues was the boards of the various municipalities didn't meet as frequently in the summer as they
Yeah.
do normally.
Well,
So
and now
I
that
think,
August is here, it's going to even be tougher.
well, I think Juliana has indicated, and Greg has indicated, and that would be Portchester and Newcastle, and Greenwich has indicated that the process is underway.
Okay.
Yes, so for Portchester, the agenda meeting for discussion is on Wednesday, and we're proposing a resolution to be signed on Monday, August 5th.
Great.
And,
So
and I
if-
believe Newcastle's August 12th or 13th that they're going to take it up.
Okay, that's good news.
Well, if you want to know, the city of Rye had two comments during the meeting. One was whether it was binding or not, and I said, no, it's not binding. And the other was the same question about the leases. And I used the analogy of a landlord aligning all his leases to expire at the same time gives the landlord a power and the tenants a weakness. And therefore, when they don't line up, it takes away the ability of all the airlines to have that power that we were looking to diffuse. But those are the only two comments that came up, and they passed it.
Okay. So actually, with the answer, we had the updates. And the distribution, the assumption is that some of the municipalities will want to distribute their resolution to various people in the county government on their own. But that what we're asking is for everyone to send their resolution to the village of Rybrook because they'll package them and send them on as groups. Because I think the importance of the whole effort in a way is to show a united front by the municipalities. And minor tweaks to the resolution, I don't think that would be a big deal, but I think that's what we want to do. So if your government wants to send it on their own, that's fine, but also send it and we'll repackage it with the others. And what we're going to do is because the county has indicated to us they'd like to get this going, that we will send the 4 that are kind of approved by now to off very soon. And then the ones that are approved in August we'll send as a second batch. And that way, by September 1st, we'll have sent all 7, hopefully. Because remember, we are on a very tight deadline. Because the agreements expire back at the end of the year, and the budget for next year has to be in place by November 1st. So it's not time is not our friend here. That's why we're moving so rapidly on this particular issue. We're not ready to move really on the other issues because we haven't seen what the master plan is going to say about them. Okay, Peter wanted to comment?
Just a question. The packaged resolutions, have we talked about who they should be sent to specifically within county government?
Yeah, I sent that out as an email a while ago, actually. We're thinking the county executive, the deputy county executive, the members of the county legislature who are representing these districts. That was basically because this is really a political process. This is the municipalities saying to elected officials, this is what's important to us.
John, I'm gonna just hop in real quick, and that's I've also spoken about this with Chris Bradbury too, and that's pretty much exactly what him and I had discussed in terms of what you just said, in terms of who should get it right now.
Okay.
Makes sense. Great.
Good. Now, the other issue I would like to discuss is our committees, and Peter Schlachtis has volunteered to work with Martha on air pollution.
If she'll have me.
That's true.
Of course.
But we probably need more people. We got Rich Flood doing noise and Nick Everett doing water. And I think, quite honestly, each of those committees should be larger. Those issues are pretty big. And we're not going to point fingers at this call, but not everyone on the call has volunteered for a committee, or a subcommittee. So we also have, I'm going to look into, with Chris Bradbury's help, because the 3 directly involved municipalities have been working on a memo themselves about the EMS reimbursement. And as soon as he finishes that, I'll show you guys what the draft is going to look like. Passenger experience. Michelle, who's on the call, has volunteered to be on that. I suspect, Michelle, that you too would appreciate another member for your group.
Yes, I would. Thank you.
Okay. And traffic on King Street. Juliana, I thought at the Rich Flood asked me, and I thought at the last meeting you had expressed an interest to working on the traffic issue.
Yes, I did.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Did he reach out to you? Because
No, I haven't heard from him.
I actually boldly went forward and said you had. So there we go.
But I have been doing some research, so I will give you an update on that when we get to that point.
Okay. So that helps on all the committees. But as I say, there are 3 that have only one person, and that's not ideal. That's not ideal. And I think the rest of us should be really, I think with Martha's memo resolution, draft resolution, I believe the 3 people in the subcommittee read it, and at least 2 other people who are on this call tonight read it. So there was a bunch of reading of it, and as Martha knows, some of the very issue that Michael raised was actually softened in the final draft. So, moving right along. So anybody want to speak up right now to volunteer to either be on air pollution, water, or the passenger experience?
I feel I've done what I can on the air pollution white paper. I'd be willing to volunteer on a different subcommittee. Not by, I don't think it's finished necessarily, but I can't take it any further at this point. And if it would help another committee, I'd be glad to pitch in.
Oh,
I
okay.
can, I
That
can,
would, Martha,
have
I'd
your
love
pick.
some help. It's Michelle.
On the passenger experience?
Yes.
I was just gonna volunteer for that, so.
Oh,
Oh,
why don't you
great.
go ahead? Everybody's jumping on the same committee.
All right, so this is Larry's going to volunteer for that. That's good.
Okay.
Martha,
I'll take Martha.
as
Nick,
as I
okay.
recall,
On the
you know
water?
you know a great deal about water, as I remember from some other comments you had very early on in this process.
Yes. Well,
Okay.
it's more in line with my background, a master's degree in environmental engineering. So that's, I know my way around groundwater contamination and surface water, et cetera.
Perfect. I'm sure Nick
Oh.
will appreciate that.
Glad to do that.
All right. So we still need help with Rich Floyd on noise.
I thought I was on noise, John.
Okay, Michael, thank you. You may have volunteered at that meeting where I forgot to turn on the
Okay.
recording.
Oh, Michael Park on it or something.
No. All right. Okay, so that does a pretty good job. And I myself are working on it with Greg Elders on the fixed base operators. Let me get back to the agenda. Yeah, as I say, Martha, you've really done a great deal of work and we all appreciate it.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is part of the air pollution subcommittee going to look at alternative fuels?
The white paper does address alternative fuels, or at least the state of the art in alternative fuels. I don't know if you've had a chance to read it.
I haven't.
Okay, well, read it and then see what you think.
Okay, thanks, Martha. You're a step ahead of me as always.
Yeah. It's an interesting story. It's worth reading that first and then deciding what we want to recommend in that regard.
Okay.
Okay. And anyone have any other comments on the subcommittee membership issue?
So I would just ask if any, for those who've read the white paper that I did on air pollution, is that approximately the length and level of detail that we're looking for? Forget about the content necessarily, but is it, covering the right topics and about the right amount of research, et cetera? I don't know if anyone had a thought on whether that's what they expected to see or if they think it should be something completely different.
Yeah,
I don't want to launch and do the same thing on water only to find out that, that's
No.
not really what the committee, the task force is looking for ultimately.
To those of you who hadn't had a chance to look at it, it's 8 pages long. Martha's on air pollution. 5 pages of text, 3 pages of graphs, roughly speaking.
Mhm.
I would ask that maybe in the next, let's call it 2 weeks. I don't know if that's enough time, but everyone who's on the call should read that report and get back to Martha with comments. Because it seems to me if this is exactly what needs to happen in this process because there's a lot of knowledge elsewhere around this group. So if people have comments or thoughts about how things should be said or what should be said or what should be stressed or what should be minimized, let's get it out and then we can discuss it at the next meeting. We have more time on master plan issues because they haven't even released the draft yet. So we do have
Right.
more time.
What's the
Yeah.
end game for the white paper? What happens to that white paper?
Same thing. Well, there was a white paper on the TUA too, but the only thing that's going to the county is the resolution.
But this is a
The
key
white
question.
paper,
Are
you
we
can
are we
brief your-
commenting on the draft, or are we coming up with separate things before the draft? I mean, if we're commenting on the draft, we got to wait till we see the draft.
Right. I thought
So
our mission was, at least at this point, to try to identify issues that should be part of the master plan, that should be part of their, their thought process in preparing the plan. And and we may still want to comment when the master plan comes out, but that some preemptive work on our part would be beneficial to the process.
Yeah. I think
That was my
Martha,
thinking.
these
Yeah.
Martha,
topics
this
were
is Peter. I
largely taken because they were in the prior master plan, right? They weren't, except for the traffic issue, they were all that. So we expect they'll be in the next version of the master plan. So that was how this list got created.
Right.
So just to clarify for myself, so the purpose of the white paper is to basically form an opinion among this group, and then when the master plan comes out, to basically see what's in the master plan, see how it jives with our white paper in the various areas and generate comments. Is that kind of the thought process?
Yeah,
Well,
and the white paper is, go
If
ahead,
we
sorry,
agree
Mark.
with the white paper contents, perhaps we are forwarding those as we all approve of them onto the county so that they can take them in consideration while they're preparing the master plan and not have to be reactive to them. They can perhaps consider the recommendations as part of their planning process.
But if we just thinking out loud, I'm sorry, if we send, I don't know how many there's going to be, 4 or 5 white papers that are each, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 pages each, is somebody at the county really going to look at those, or are we better off distilling those down into, kind of an executive summary and then basically using the various white papers as perhaps more detailed backup? Just a thought.
Yeah, also the white papers could serve as a backup because ideally, where we get leverage as a group is to have the municipality pass a resolution. So those papers are going to be the backup to what
Mhm.
resolution they could agree to. And
Got it.
that's kind of the process I see, because we do want to stick together. We don't want to just send in papers, which may be good papers, but they
Mhm.
won't have the same impact
If we don't,
as a resolution, I think.
got it. Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's the
Wait,
May,
wait,
may
wait a
I
minute.
share a couple of thoughts?
Yep.
Sorry, but this is Peter. Was that a yes to me?
Yes, yes to you, for me.
Okay.
Curious what you think.
So, look, I think I mean, I've only brushed over it initially. Okay. And I think it's a important, and, it seems to me, I'm looking forward to delving in further. I think it's an important and helpful way for us as a group to get into, what could be seen as a challenging a challenging issue, given again that we're not a technical group, and our purpose is more political, than it is technical. It's to make the county. It's to help make sure that the county seriously considers and tries to address interests and concerns of importance to our communities, right? It is not our responsibility necessarily to come up with the specific solutions, although we certainly want to be seen as being, I would think we'd want to be seen as being helpful in that regard. But in order to do that, there's a certain amount of education that both members of our group need and our municipal governments, who we want to back us with resolutions, need as well, for them to feel comfortable. But there's also a limitation as to what we can reasonably expect all of us to absorb. I think it was sort of understood when we formed this group that it wasn't going to require people become, overnight experts in the myriad technical areas impacted by airport operations. And certainly, we can't realistically expect our various municipal officials to gain, more than a modicum of familiarity with the technical side of things. So we want to offer information so that we can all be comfortable, and so we can try to avoid the kind of the kind of issues that maybe came up with one piece of the TUA resolution. But again, without trying to twist us into a technical advisory body.
Well,
I think
that's
the
right.
TUA resolution.
It can never become a technical advisory body. I mean, that's just
Well,
not influence, right?
Well,
Well, I
I
understand that.
think,
What
I think
isn't-
our job, we want to raise well-founded questions
Right,
for
exactly.
the master planning group, for them to make sure they are giving careful thought to going forward. By well-founded, I mean, you have to do your homework and you have to ask a lot of questions of the various documents that are out there, various reports, the airport staff, et cetera. We're going to do the tour, another opportunity to learn. So from what we're able to learn, we're going to have some good questions that I think are worth forwarding on to the county. And based on those questions, we're going to have a couple of recommendations, as we did with the TUA, that may not be perfect, but I think are a starting point for the county to consider. That's the way I look at our mission: raise well-founded questions and make recommendations based on what we've learned.
And
I
that's
think
my
that-
view as well. Yeah, but we have to just do that together, because when we do it together, that's 7 municipalities basically that are important politically in Westchester County.
Right. So what I was getting at then is that to take one aspect of the master plan, and create an 8-page white paper on one of what theoretically could what is already more than a handful, a couple of handfuls of topics, and what could grow from there, because the master plan encompasses an awful lot, frankly, is I would say probably at the outside of what we want to aim for. I think that for those people on other committees, I would say that unless it's amply warranted, we should be aiming to consolidate our comments as much as possible. The TUA was essentially just about 3.5 pages involved in the background for that, and and that I think worked well, as Martha put it together, as a briefing document, both for us as a group and for our municipalities. So, I guess the bottom line is, from my point of view, I just think it's important that other people as wonderful as this is, not to take anything away from what Martha's done, but it shouldn't necessarily, that shouldn't be the minimum standard that people feel like they're going to be held to.
All right.
Because,
no one said it was a minimum standard. Somebody asked.
No, I understand
how
that.
long
So
was Martha's
the
paper?
question was, I'm not making accusations, John. I'm just saying the question was asked.
Accusation, it's just factual.
Yeah,
And I
I don't
agree.
think all topics lend themselves to, aren't going to be as data driven as air pollution is. The county does an emissions inventory every couple of years for the airport. So there's a ton of data, right? There's just a ton of data that we can draw from. That's not going to be the case with noise necessarily, right? So not every topic is going to be treated the same way, but I think you have to do enough reading and research to come up with those, what I call well-founded questions, right? And it may be that the queries of them are more of a political nature in terms of how the county is approaching different issues, and has nothing to do with data. Not every topic is data driven.
All right.
But I think you can tailor, a document, a couple of pages to each topic, and whether it's data driven or not, summarize what the key issues are.
Because in a way,
again, that's exactly. So it sounds like we're all on the same page here, and and I'm glad to hear it.
because what we want is the resolutions that we'll ask the municipalities to agree to basically state an objective that these things are important to us, without, you know what I mean? That's kind of what it has to be, because
Yeah, if we're going to have a resolution that all these disparate communities are going to have to approve, it's going to have to be an executive summary, very simple.
Yes.
It could reference, more detailed documents, and it's got to be. They're not going to approve something that's 20 pages long, so it's got to be fairly simple in 2 pages.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to Nick's point about disparate communities, Martha, I took a look at the white paper quickly. I would stay away from the flight path issue, because air pollution is air pollution and gross, and moving flight paths just moves the air pollution from one location to another. We all agree to reduce it, but given that we're disparate communities, one community isn't going to want more air pollution relocated over its community as opposed to from another. So to produce a consensus among the disparate communities, those type of zero-sum issues are going to be ones that'll be difficult for us to reach a consensus on.
Same with water. I mean, Greenwich doesn't care about water. It's all coming from them to us.
The flight paths are so well established, though, for approach and exit from the airport based on the runways, right?
Yeah,
that's a very fixed geography right there. And I think there are, and it's not just FAA, the landing and takeoff areas where the planes are at their lowest altitudes are probably the most severely impacted. I don't think there's any doubt about that, because they're getting the greatest deposition of pollutants. And there's very little information about the type and aerial extent of that deposition. None that I was able to find. And that information should be considered and discussed with those impacted communities so that they can make proper land use decisions for those particular areas.
Well, that's a community. Yeah, that's a community by community decision, not a county decision.
Right.
No,
Well, the county
is
supposed to be coming up with the information to share with those communities, and that has not happened.
Well, I was just reading the point that says advocate to limit flight paths over sensitive residential and school areas. So the identification of what are sensitive, I don't think anyone would suggest that where they live is not a sensitive residential area.
Right. Well, okay, we can change that recommendation. I see what you're saying, but
saying
the
we-
point is that there are very specific areas of impact in the immediate vicinity, 2,000 feet from the airport, that are probably getting more than their fair share of pollution.
And necessarily, and perhaps unavoidably. I mean,
Right.
right, so there's not a lot of, latitude for discussion there.
Well,
Well, the latitude for discussion is sharing the information with those communities so that they can make better decisions. Some of those land uses are fairly recent and are probably inappropriate for that area.
Those are municipal decisions. Not
But
county.
do they know any better? I don't know that they do.
You need to visit that with with each town and municipal board.
Yeah, but
And if-
Michael, the point is the county supplying appropriate information about risk factors and impacts with the local municipalities
Well, again, I'm a
to
planning board
enable
member.
them
My fellow
to
planning
enable
board
them to
member is
make
here,
informed local
and
decisions.
and that diligence falls upon, each municipality. I mean, Larry and I are actively involved at this. Okay,
Yeah,
Yeah, so
it's
are you
hard.
saying-
It's hard. And not everybody knows how airplanes, how deposition from airplanes work. You don't know how much of that gas is leaded. The airport knows. They know how many flights are going over your area with leaded gas being deposited, the emissions being deposited. So, they need to share that information with you for you to make proper land use decisions,
but
and
it's
that
up
just
to
isn't
those-
happening.
but it's up to those municipalities to be proactive when they're making those decisions, because ultimately those are municipal decisions.
They
I
are
mean,
municipal decisions, but how can you make the decision if you don't have any data?
Larry and I, that's up to each town board to get the data. We just went through this.
But we just spent months, on one of these and dug in very deeply,
Yeah,
though.
it's not up to the county to spoon feed the municipality that information. And when someone decides to authorize a project that's adjacent to the airport, they know the airport's there. It's not catching them by surprise. So to suggest that
Right,
it's
well, that's an interesting perspective that some municipalities, I guess, might prefer to have information be less available or accessible, as long as they can dig it up when and if they want it. What I'm hearing.
No, it's up to the municipality to get the information that they need to make the appropriate decisions. Larry and I just went through this with a project on the MBIA campus on King Street, where the planes are flying directly overhead. I testified in front of the town board about the impact of the airport, on that project that it's going to have on the residents, the altitude, the frequency,
The
of the
noise.
planes. Larry, you can speak to it.
No, you're doing just fine. I mean, we made it real clear to the town board as to the impact of this particular project and the fact that, as you just said, Michael, planes are coming over, they're coming over at a certain altitude, there's a certain noise level. All of that was made clear.
It wasn't a county decision at all. It's a municipal decision.
Well, let me make a suggestion, because these are all kind of interesting points. Why don't why don't we all read Martha's paper and then decide if that were the paper, what would you do about it? What points about it would be useful, and how would we work it in to a resolution that all the municipalities could agree to? Was that fair? I mean, because otherwise we're a little abstract, and I think given Martha's work, that would be a good starting point for looking at it. Anybody else think that's okay?
Yeah, I guess I'm fine with reading the paper. I haven't done it yet, but there's a reality here, and a reality that we all have to face. Planes are going to come in. They're going to come in at a certain altitude, and they're going to fly over existing residences, and they're going to fly over new residences. The flight paths are established. They're not going to change. So there's from a practical point of view, unless you start to change, how the airplanes work, what fuel they use, there's not much that you can change about this. Kind of is what it is, and those who live in those particular areas, they moved into those areas, or they're going to move into those areas knowing the situation.
Yeah, and what I would say, and I think the same thing as Larry, we all are in favor of reducing
Sure.
gross level of air pollution, of noise, of water pollution. We're all in favor of that. It's not up to this board to try to reallocate it among the communities in the county. Okay.
No, and and I don't know that anyone's really suggesting that, but it's a fair point. Let me just, if I could, address something, Larry,
just
that
before
you
we
said.
go on with that, Peter, I'm sorry to interrupt, but Martha has produced a paper. Why don't we all read the paper and use that as a basis for discussion? Maybe she hit upon an angle that could be the one we would want to use. Maybe she didn't. So I think we have to read that to put us all at least on the same idea, or have an understanding of what Martha's idea was
Agreed.
about the paper. I just think that's only fair.
Of course.
Agreed.
Well, as a basis
Yeah,
moving
absolutely. I'm
forward,
sorry.
every
I
paper
didn't
that's
think there was
prepared
any.
needs to have things that can go directly into the executive summary.
Right.
Yeah. So so we've done a good job of identifying key issues that strike us as being, important, meaningful to our various municipalities. And some of them obviously don't have equal importance for every municipality. But I think between our discussion last time and our discussion this time, I think we've essentially identified the fact that just because we don't all see every issue in exactly the same way, there is an important distinction between those issues that may impact some more than others, but addressing them for the ones that it's more important for doesn't mean worsening things for others. A good example of that is dealing with the downstream water pollution and or surges that come, or flooding, that get exacerbated perhaps by the airport. Fixing that, for communities downstream doesn't harm communities upstream of the airport. And so we can all get together on that. And similar with the EMS issue. Then again, as Michael and Larry pointed out, there could be certain types of solutions to alleviate communities who are most impacted by, say, noise or air pollution, that have the unfortunate effect of worsening conditions for neighboring communities. And those are going to be far more difficult to act on, in this type of forum, even if you can claim that the alleviation will be major, but the dispersion effect will be minor. That's still going to be very, very difficult for us to approach, and we should understand that going in and probably avoid those types of things.
But let's just give Martha's paper a chance and let's see where it leads us.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. But I think that from an approach point of view, okay, and again, Martha, so much respect and admiration for what you've done. I think that from Martha's, efforts being acknowledged, and this paper aside, whether it's that issue or other issues, our job is not to allocate, is what I'm saying. Okay, we understand the goals, but it's not for us to distribute, is what I'm saying, among the different.
But I think there's a bigger picture issue in front of us, or question in front of us. We've divided things into issues, but we haven't necessarily, I realize now, given the same thought to bigger picture themes. And let me just be specific as an example. Okay, there's a longstanding county policy dating all the way back to the 80s at least of non-expansion of the airport. And we talk about, you know, looking to reduce gross noise levels, gross pollution levels of water, air, et cetera. But at the very least, the county has regularly reiterated, at least in theory, this position that the county airport should not expand. Now, of course, you know, there's the whole question of what does expansion mean? You know, what are the various ways to define it? And what can the county actually control or not control? It came up most recently in a county legislature resolution just this past season, where again, the overall principle was reiterated. Now, if you look at the existing master plan, because of the way the prior administration incorporated economic forecasting into the document, and this was sort of generic economic forecasting, it looked as if you read that document, the airport can anticipate significantly increased demand over time, and therefore the master plan, according to its own logic, has to present a good number of airport development projects to meet that forecast demand. Now, so that immediately, and there's no mention or consideration in the document either of the longstanding county policies against airport expansion and how those would be or could be or should be reconciled, or choices that should be made between the policy and the forecast, nor is there any mention of the terminal use regulations and the fact that even though there may be economic pressures that would lead to expansion of airline operations at the airport, legally those can't happen. So despite these policies and limitations that the airport has in place, one of the things that most concerns certain municipal governments like Rybrook and community groups was that the master plan itself ignored those things and just laid out airport development and expansion initiatives to take into account this, theoretical generic growth predictions. As municipalities, we may be concerned about some of the, we may very well be concerned about these specific issues, but are we not concerned about the big picture of not enabling the airport to slide down the slippery slope of expansion? And what does that mean if we want to prevent it? Because, in some ways, that's the big framework here that everything within the master plan is going to reflect. And upon further reflection of our process, which I think is again really good in terms of what we're looking to tackle, I think we may have forgotten the forest for the trees, because I think we should be considering the larger issue of airport expansion or non-expansion, and making sure that that's incorporated in a better way into the master plan, which, by the way, shouldn't be a big ask, because County Executive Latimer, as much as agreed with that and certainly acknowledged it when he was starting this process up, some years ago. So I'm not sure, does that mean another subcommittee? Maybe so. but I want to bring that up before we go too far down the road that we're on, where we're focusing only on some of the subtopics.
Well, I think all the subtopics can have that as an underlying theme. So I think as everybody thinks about their topic, they should keep that very thought in mind. How do these topics relate to the possibility of airport expansion? And what recommendations should be made relative to the specific topic that would mitigate that idea going forward?
Well, also
Right?
in our recommendations, recommendation number 1 should be where all the communities are opposed to an expansion of the airport. I thought that was sort of one of the
It's the
reasons for putting
baseline.
the resolution on the TUAs.
Yeah, that's what I
Exactly.
think. Yeah, that's
And
what
then
I think.
each of these topics can, I think air pollution for sure, from what I've learned, there's a very good reason to control additional flights out of the airport, especially the private aviation, so much of which uses leaded gas still. I mean, it's shocking to me. We've done away with leaded gas in cars for decades, right? We still have private planes landing there every day with leaded gas exhaust being deposited in those areas.
Yeah, I don't
So-
disagree with it. It's just a
So
chicken
I
and egg
think that's,
problem.
another reason why you can tie that back into the non-expansion theme. That we should not be looking to expand commercial use, or private use of the airport for that reason.
I
You can
think
take each theme and tie it back to why we think they all are good reasons, technical reasons why the airport should not expand.
So I agree with the point on the airport expansion or non-expansion. I also agreed with Nick's comment that I thought that's what we were doing when we were endorsing the TUA. And in fact, I think we have a line in that resolution that, reaffirms the passenger.
Yeah, we do. There's a sentence that specifically nails that.
Right. I think the question that we have to confront, and Martha, I agree with you about, I raised the alternative fuels early on myself. And I agree with you about leaded and unleaded fuels. I think the question, that occurs to me is, to what degree do we confront the problem of limited capacity? And, the alternative fuel question at the airport is also the same problem, we confront with electric vehicles and, charging infrastructure. And obviously, charging infrastructure, there's more land in the country than there is in the airport. So how do we address, and to what degree is it this task force's responsibility, to address the challenges that the airport confronts of limited capacity for, both types of fuel? It goes back to the earlier question about, how much diligence do we do? How much do we become the expert on the topic?
Well, I hate to say it, but if we're going to a resolution and we're talking about politics, we have to consider only things that every municipality is going to agree to. So we're kind of limited right there.
No, I understand. But if we're going to achieve, if we're going to say we want to achieve this lofty goal, okay, that has real on the ground limitations, to what degree do we have to address those limitations?
Yeah, I agree with you, Michael, and to some extent, the limitations themselves are technical. I mean, the county AAB has had meetings that have been taken up in no small part by discussing the technical limitations of providing fuel at the airport, and how and how much, and whether how alternative fuels might come into that. So that, now, does that mean that that's just too technical and beyond our and beyond our mandate? I think we back up a second. I think it would be important to back up, and before we spend a lot of a lot more time, both on the alternative fuels and perhaps on other aspects of it, we should all think about and maybe confer a bit with our elected officials whether at a higher level there would be consensus in calling for the airport, in calling for the master plan to emphasize and prioritize even more on improving the sustainability profile of aviation at Westchester County Airport. Ranging from just a declaration of support for sustainability initiatives, of which alternative fuels, could be a good example of one, all the way to perhaps advocating for the airport, to be a credentialed, leader in this, and model and leader across the across the United States, or globally. Who knows? I'm just saying we could call on that without getting too deep in the weeds on how that would technically be accomplished, if we want the master plan to go in that direction. And again, the county itself overall this administration has dedicated significant resources to raising the sustainability profile of county facilities and projects and activities. So if we wanted to call for something like that and highlight something like that for the master plan, we wouldn't be wasting our breath. But I think that's what we need to do. And that's what, the work that Martha has done, for example, is great because it brings out these issues and these concerns. But we kind of need to hear back from people about, again, whether promoting sustainability in aviation would be considered good for our communities and something that, we could get behind, no blank check, but at least that gives us something to work with. If there's no consensus on that general principle, then we're not really going to be able, then it wouldn't make sense for us to spend a lot of time on the specifics of it in any given area.
And I think to your point, it is a general principle because there are capacity issues, there are demand issues. You don't want to be storing alternative fuels when there's no demand for it either. So I think it is a mission statement type of task.
But, okay, so why don't we all agree? Martha, I'm putting you on the spot a little bit. We all look at Martha's paper. Martha, if you, based on this discussion, you want to tweak anything, feel free. We'll read the new version. But if you don't, feel free to let that one stand and you can talk to any other points you want to make. And then we all have to say, we'll read it by date X and we can have a conversation on date Y. And the question, everybody agree we should do that? What everyone did earlier.
Yeah,
So
we
why don't why don't we set the two dates now so that we can have a meeting and discuss it? I mean, it would be good
That's
to get this discussed and the ideas at least surfaced before we moved on to a lot of other things, right?
Yeah, I did see this white paper as a trial balloon that
Right.
we can use potentially as a template for these other issues or not. So, when you read it, think about the other topics with that in mind. And what in this one you would or would not want in terms of recommendations, perhaps for the other, in terms of focus or identification of communities, whatever it is. Think about whether that same line of thinking is the kind of thing you'd want to see in the other write-ups on these topics. And if we can kind of come to some agreement on this one, then maybe that'll help as a template for the others going forward. And no pride of authorship, everyone. I am, Nick knows I have a very thick skin and I did this because I really wanted to get something out there for this exact discussion. So I really appreciate the feedback.
No, we appreciate you kicking this off, Martha. Okay, which date do we want to meet to discuss Martha's paper? Would 2 weeks from tonight be too aggressive? I unfortunately am not at my home, so I don't have a calendar in front of me, so I can't say what date that is.
That'll be the 13th
Yeah,
of
13th.
that's a
August.
tough week for me. Can we say 3?
What
Yeah,
was
3
that?
would be better for me too.
Yeah, 3 weeks would be better. But with that said,
Okay.
That'd be the 20th then?
yeah, that week. Yeah, the 20th would be fine.
August is tough for me, Michelle, but September is better for me.
We have an airport advisory meeting on the 21st, Peter. And Larry, we don't have any planning board meetings in August, do we?
Just one next Monday night.
The next Monday?
The
An
5th.
airport official I interact with, reference, well, that's not true. I did, those of you who know her. And I just asked that, if
Peter, you cut out.
Peter, we lost you.
yeah, sorry. I asked
Peter, it's happening again. Your connection
April-
shot.
I think you're frozen, Peter.
Yes.
Must be an airplane going over his head.
All right. While
Does that work for you, Greg? You're kind of key here too, August 20th?
I could, in theory, again, worst case scenario, just have again either like Peter when you start it. Again, I always try to make as many as I can. But what I did want to say is that let me just make a suggestion. You guys can again choose to consider or not. So that way, again, we're not going in circles because again, we've had this problem before with pretty much every single time we come to any meeting because again, there's 14 of you again on this meeting. I can do tomorrow because like I don't have the account information for me right now, is just create like another doodle poll in terms of just vote on it, whatever date wins or has the most votes is the winner. But the only thing I need is that I just need a week to work with. So that way we're not, again, just going around in circles in terms of what week works best. But again, because I've said this numerous times before, there's never going to be a day that's going to probably work for everybody here when there's 14 of you and you guys are all committed to other things.
Right. No, you're right. You're right, Greg.
So why don't you put down the 19th, 20th, and 21st and see which day that week works the
The
best for everyone.
21st isn't going to work, Nick. There's an airport board meeting that night.
But so at least but anyway, we'll do it the week of the 19th to the 23rd.
Okay.
that sounds good. I assume I got cut off and
You did.
No.
Ah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've just asked, so hopefully we'll have information back on, what the county's plans for the master plan would be, given that the litigations that were cited as slowing it down are winding down. So if I get any feedback on that response, I'll share it with the group.
Okay. So, well, we skipped right to the date of the next meeting, but we skipped over the airport visit, which Greg has arranged for August 29th for
Yes.
everybody who can make it.
And I will touch base on that, but just that is something, John, I did want to bring up now since we were just talking about that. So since again, that is pretty much the third week of August. So I think it's a fair point for me to raise is that, so then is that just going to be in your regular August meeting or because you said this, we were mentioning, again, if I was understanding what this whole correctly from among all of you is that you wanted just to talk about the white paper that Martha put together, but would it be just a value then just to have your regular August meeting at that point since you're already 3 weeks into the month?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Okay.
I think.
I have that for 9:30,
Mike?
Greg. Is that right?
What happened?
I have the airport visit for 9:30 in the morning. On the 20th.
Yeah, so I'm gonna touch base with that, but I just want to confirm just before we move on to that, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Is that so? And then
Yeah, let's do both together.
yeah, so then it'll be the 19th, the 20th, or the 22nd. Then all right, so I'll just do what I've done before, is create a doodle poll. All right. And then just one other thing too, it's just that I just want to confirm, because we did talk about it, but again, I need to know, because then it'll be Chris and I who are sending them out. Is that so, again, while I have everybody here, is everyone okay with then what John said earlier? Because again, he did make a mention of it, but no one really said yes or no. Is that we can send out with the 4 we have now, which again, Chris and I will handle that, and then I will discuss it tomorrow in terms of how we're gonna go about that. To, again, county legislator, deputy county, the county legislators, the county executive, and deputy county executive. Is that okay with everybody? That Chris and I do
The,
that?
the only thing that I would add to, if you're gonna do that, you have to make it clear that, you know, the other 3 are in process. You don't want
No, we
there
will.
to be a perception
Oh.
that, you know, we only got 4 out of 7 towns.
No, we are. But again, I was just speaking about this with Chris just yesterday, actually, in terms of when he was looking to start that, and he just wanted me to make sure, because I did tell him I was coming. I just got clarity from you guys before I proceeded, so that was, I can tell him tomorrow that I got the approval.
And you told us before the county was anxious to get them, so you might as well
Yeah.
forward the ones we have.
Yeah, but again, I just want to double check us. I want us to all be the same page.
So is that going to include I think the proper title is the chairperson of the legislature, or just the
It's probably gonna end up going to all of them. I mean, they're gonna share. We'll just send it to all of them, because remember, at the end of the day, the whole county legislative board has to approve
right?
again any TUA or master plan. So it would make sense, most likely, just to send it to all of them.
That makes sense.
Well, wait, Peter, what about Nancy? She's co-chair of the, what is it, the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. Does it pay to send it to Nancy and her co-chair?
But well, if it goes to all the legislators, then it's
They're all
going to
gonna read it.
Nancy.
Oh,
It's like, at the end of the day, remember, if it's a county agreement, any county IMA, it has to be approved by the whole legislative body.
I thought you were only sending it to the 3 of them.
Yeah, the others won't, it won't have the same impact if they don't represent one of these municipalities.
No, again, everyone's gonna read it. So I know, I agree that obviously the
Well,
ones
look.
who are most important, again, would be the ones who represent the areas. But again, if just send it to, I've even spoken with Chris, send it to all of them. And again, they can all read it again at some point. But at the end of the
I
day,
actually
it's gotta be approved by the county board.
could it be seen by the county as, could it be viewed negatively by the county if we send it, just randomly send it to county legislators from Yonkers or Greenberg? Not that, as opposed to, say, going through the chairperson and or vice chair of the county legislature and the legislators who represent the towns in this group. Isn't it kind of up to them maybe to share it more widely, or could we be seen as, a group of towns that are, pushing our agenda onto other parts of the county? I'm just raising the question.
So let me just start with one part. And again, we're open to all suggestions. So to my understanding, again, I could be wrong on this, but I was under the impression there was a way that, because again, for example, again, I'm only going to use Rybrook example. Now you can reach out to each individual trustees, but there is a general email for them, because if you want to reach out to them all collectively. Now, it was my understanding that the county had a mechanism of that sort, and that was what mechanism I was thinking. But if they don't, then that's an entirely different conversation. But that's something I'll confirm with Chris if they do have that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
but I
might
think
suggest
Peter-
that you confer with Nancy or one of the other legislators who represent our area, just to get a sense from them of what the most appropriate and productive
Yeah.
communication strategy would be.
Yeah, I would agree. I would ask Legislator Barr what her recommendation would be.
Yeah,
Okay, that's fine.
okay. So I think I mentioned again as that the date of the airport visit is August 29th.
That is correct. Yes.
Now, the other piece of new news is, you'll recall, one of the Newcastle representatives, Andrea Meekum, resigned, but she's been replaced by James Benton. So, Greg, you're going to add him to the email distribution list,
I
right?
already have as effective today.
Excellent.
Now, there is just a backtrack a little bit in the airport, as I said. I know I emailed it. I just want to go over it with everyone again, what the stipulations were. So I know, Michael, you brought up the first part. What I was going to mention is that I did have a conversation with April about this, and she did give me very specific instructions. So again, everybody needs to arrive when we're at the airport parking lot 9:30 sharp. Because again, she wants to kick this off at 9:45, and that's a hard time she wants to start it. So it should end off around 11, but I did confirm with her just to be sure that there will, again, it should everything go according to plan and everybody gets there on time, then we'll be able to do a quick tour. And again, you'll be able to ask her and her team, again, any questions as it relates to the TUA of the master plan. And again, as I told her, it's an opportunity for them as well to learn. As I told April, I want this to be a transparent process between us in terms of this task force and in terms as also April and her team. Now, I do want to make one thing.
Can
I
I
do
just ask you, Greg, to clarify? I mean, it's a simple question, but maybe I'm the only one who didn't get it. When she said meet in the airport parking lot, what parking lot did she
the main
precisely?
the main parking lot, which like well, really is there only one that there's only one parking lot to put a park in. And again, hang on to your ticket because again, when you park,
Okay.
it'll give you like a voucher ticket. You want to hang on to that, and you're gonna bring
Gre-
that with you when we get to the meeting room.
Greg,
And
I apologize. I will just say that I don't think it is 100% accurate to say there's only one parking lot. So
Yeah.
if there could
the
be
main parking lot,
greater
the main parking lot for the
clarification of
public.
that.
The main
Yeah.
parking lot for for the public. Yeah, yes, fine. Is there other
But
parking lots?
even then, there are 3 levels. So
It doesn't matter. So I actually have it on a Google map as well that I prepared just to show. But again, it's
but does she want to meet us outside at the parking lot, or does she want us to come
that's
in
what
from the
that,
parking lot?
that's Peter. That's what I'm about to get into.
Sorry.
So we're gonna meet into the room where Peter and Michael, where you guys have your county airport meeting. So it's that back conference room. So Michael and Peter, you guys go to that room every month, so you guys know what the room is.
What building is that? I mean, I don't know the
It's in the
airport well enough to go
guys,
anywhere.
I'm getting into all of that. Just let me go one step at a time. So in the main airport, well, again, where it is in the airport building, it's going to be on the second floor. Now, again, it's hard for me to get in. I don't have any images inside of it, the airport building.
The
But
passenger terminal.
yes, but it's on the second floor, with, as Peter said, the passenger terminal is. And I'll be waiting outside that door because, again, if you've never been to it before, it can be a little bit confusing to find. But it is going to be the second floor in the passenger terminal. It's going to be a white door, and that's where all of us are going to enter, and then we'll be led into the conference room that they have there, and where we'll have our discussion. But let me just try to share my screen real quick, just so I can show everybody. All right, can everybody see my screen?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah, so this right here is the airport where there are parking lounges. That is 3 stories. You can park in any one of the 3 stories, doesn't matter. Then you're going to walk across right here. Wait. Remember, into the main airport building. And on the second floor, as Peter said, the passenger terminal lounge, that's where we're going to go from there.
Actually easier to park on the second floor, and then you can walk across that sky bridge.
Yeah, but you may get to the airport and not be able to find a parking space and
That's
have
it.
to park on the ramps like you see all the time.
There'll be parking in terms of, again, I did this back in May, as early in the morning. So there's 3 different stories. You may not be able to find one, the second floor per se,
No, I've been there early in the morning. Sometimes there's no parking at all.
but more likely than not, there'll be something. But
So let me just reassure
find wherever you
people,
can park your car.
the county is currently monitoring more than it used to the usage of the parking garage. If and they know this event will be taking place. If they feel like the parking garage is exceptionally full at that time, I have no doubt that they will reach out to Greg and provide supplemental instructions. There's another lot next to the terminal they can open up to us, as they have for the Airport Advisory Board, in which case we'll get instructions. There are a couple of other options. So the bottom line is, I wouldn't worry too much about the parking, because I imagine the airport will, can and
Okay.
will be, take care of us.
They do certainly the capacity. And again, that's what April said she wanted, and then they said, make clear to keep on to the ticket that you get when you park your car, so that way her staff can redeem it for you. That way you guys don't get charged for it. So again, when you get it, don't just throw it in the garbage.
By the way, I don't know if people are aware, but if you go to the airport website these days, there's a banner at the top, a rolling banner that actually gives you information about the capacity and fullness of the parking garage, along with instructions on alternative places to go if it's full. Just FYI.
Good.
Yeah, well, again, I'll be in contact with April, and if anything should change that she tells me, that I'll let everybody know. But that's, again, as based on my last two correspondence with her, that's been what she stated she wants all of us to do. And again, she said she'll be happy to take any questions regarding TUA master plan, or if you get any other general knowledge about the airport regarding to that's relevant to this process. And then I've told her same thing. Any of the questions you want to ask about the task force, again, you're more welcome to do so.
So are we supposed to meet in the parking lot or in the
No.
outside the conference room?
No, yes, outside the door that leads to the conference room. I'll be standing outside of that door. I'll be on the second floor. I'll be waiting. I know John and no, sorry, Michael and Peter, you guys can go right in because you guys know where to go. But for everybody else, because I know that again, even for me, like the first time I've been there a few times now, but it is a little confusing to find the first time you go there. So it'll be on the second floor. I'll be there to kind of help guide everybody.
Send us your cell phone number.
Yes, I will send that out so that everybody can call me.
Once you
Thank you.
once you get to the second floor of the terminal, you will be able to see Greg. And once you see Greg, he will be able to usher you in through the door. So
And
just
again,
it's not that confusing if you just get up to the second floor.
But and also too, I'll just be very honest, it's not really big inside. So it's not like it's a maze getting in there. Once you're in there, again, it's very small. So it's not, you won't have to do a lot of searching. But they said for those who have never seen it before, again, it can be a tad bit confusing, sure, but again, it's not a very big building.
I have a question.
Yes.
So I noticed that the bridge looks like it has 2 floors of its own.
So
Does the bridge have 2 floors in it or no?
yeah, so it's 3
does.
floors altogether, even like
Okay, thank you. That's it.
itself, and then again, you could take
So it's the
escalator,
first floor of the bridge, not the second floor of the bridge. Got it.
but there's 3 floors in total. But again, we're
Yes,
gonna be
thank you. That's all I want to double check.
I mean, 4-3, again, it's just another, like, I didn't even know there's like another like waiting, like observatory area up there. But again,
Okay.
just come prepared. Again, the only thing I just will say is that, again, she is giving us our time. So I know I put out a doodle poll. So again, I just asked that from you guys, just again, please be there on time. So that way we can kickstart this off on a good note. And then we can get the full value out of it. And if again, the tour is dependent on if we all, show up on time and get started on the time that we want to get started on. So, and just having a turnout. And the one thing I will ask is that, please, there's no questions about like any political, like migrants coming in. I'm not going to be I'm not going to be happy at all if questions like that get asked. We're here to talk about the TUA and the master plan. She's giving us our time. That's the one thing I will ask, is that no questions about that. Okay, are we all understood about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, and some people have their cameras off. We can't see them nodding, but otherwise.
But I guess I'm going to assume, again, I think we're all reasonable here. Again, but just that's the one thing we'll ask, because again, I'm not going to be happy if that's asked.
Hang on one second, Greg. No one should make this political, but to the extent that we're all here from different municipalities and maybe talking to people about the airport, and this question comes up, isn't there an opportunity to allow April to, if anyone's interested, to provide a brief factual answer about what actually happens and doesn't happen at the airport?
Only thing is that the reason why I don't want that to be asked, I just don't want it to the question like that to deviate in terms of why we're there, in terms of, again, learning as much about airport operations and the TUA and the master plan. And I want everyone to get as much value what asked out of it and what we're there. That's why, again, I really would rather that, unless again, unless she brings it up, then again, that's her prerogative to do so. But I would rather we didn't, so we can focus on the task on hand while we're there.
I'm
Fair
sorry,
enough.
Greg, I stepped away for a second. What's the sensitive question that's off limits?
No, it's just that, and not just that though, too. I just like questions about like migrants coming in. Again, I just want us to really focus on the task and why we're there. If she
I
brings
see.
it up in her team, that's on her. But, and again, she's giving us her time in terms of discuss, which said about TUA and the master plan. And again, I want us to really focus on the task at hand
Okay,
while
thank
we're
you.
doing this.
All right, okay, I just missed it because I stepped away. Thank you.
And people should know that, to the extent that there are other questions that aren't, related close enough to, why we're there at the airport, at every monthly airport advisory board meeting, there is an open opportunity towards the beginning of the meeting for any of you or anybody else that you speak with to attend either virtually or in person and ask any question they want about the airport to both the board members and airport staff and county officials. So there's plenty of ways to satisfy people's curiosity.
Yeah, thank you. And that could be done there. Thank
The
you, Peter.
last airport tour I was on, we got to see Judge Judy's plane. Are we gonna get to see that again?
I'll say this, but I was just there last time. We saw WWE's plane came in their private jet. So you may, and when we go on the tour, Mac, again, it all depends on, of course, who's flying in. But again, should it all work out according to plan? Again, it is of huge value. I've done it a couple times. So the first time I did it, it was really foggy. I was in January, so really get to see much. But the last time I did it, just a few months ago, as an event for the Chamber of Commerce, it was cool. It was very informative to see like all the different like hangars that are around, and they give you a walkthrough, including about stormwater management. So if they just about every topic that that has been addressed here there's an opportunity to be really addressed thoroughly. And all the airport staff, when we're driving around, they kind of point everything out for us. And then you can ask them too about as we go on, like any questions about certain like, about these topics as we go along.
Okay. No, it sounds good, Greg. I appreciate you doing this.
Yeah, thank you for setting it up.
Okay, I think we have, except I guess, Peter, you said that there might be some information forthcoming on the progress of the master plan now that some of the legal issues are being settled.
Well, I mentioned that I had reached out to April Gaspari about that. I have not heard back, so I was hoping possibly I'd hear back before this meeting. But between now and the AAB meeting coming up in August, certainly by the time we get together again, I would hope that we'll hear more. And as soon as I hear anything, I will share it, as I'm sure Mike will and whoever else.
Okay, good.
Although I'm probably less optimistic than you are about it, Peter, just knowing the glacial speed with which those things move.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm optimistic exactly, but I'm hopeful.
Well,
And I wouldn't blame you for being less hopeful either.
I think we've covered all the items that were on the written agenda. Does anyone have any other issue they'd like to raise?
I would just raise, it's interesting when you go on the airport tour to see how deteriorated the hangars are. And the level of disrepair of these hangars that house some really expensive equipment. That was one of the impressions I took away. For all of the issues that we explore, what are the incentives? This is maybe digressing, but that was what struck me is you see that NetJets hangar. Here's this tremendously successful company that has hundreds of millions of dollars of jets, in this hangar. And this thing hasn't been, renovated since 1949. And what are the series of incentives, that cause that? And I don't know that it's relevant to our task at hand, but there has to be some macro force that creates those incentives that yield that result. I don't know what they are. I'd be interested to ask April that though.
It's a really good point, Mike, and I think it's completely central to what we're doing here. Because if you think about what a master plan is, it is not who goes in and out of the airport, because the county has no control over the airspace and the use of the airspace. The only real thing the county can control, other than the special exception made by the terminal use regulations for airlines, are the facilities at the airport. And to the extent that those facilities enable and encourage use, either greater use or lesser use or different uses of the airport, it's up then to the aviation community to to act, to utilize the airport or to avoid the airport or to pick a different airport.
Yeah. Yeah.
So and the fact of the matter is that there's a significant percentage of structures at the airport that are quite evidently approaching their maximum or exceeding their
Yeah.
maximum planned lifespan. And the question becomes, well, what happens next? Because if you ask anyone in the aviation community, at least in my experience, the answer is, oh, well, we need bigger. We need not just better, not just, let's rip this down and create a modern version of it. But while we're doing that, it needs to be bigger. And the initial answer is, when questioned about that, the initial response is, oh, we don't mean that we want to have more traffic in and out of the airport. It's just that, planes are bigger these days. And, we want the elbow room that we don't have to more safely and efficiently deal with current levels of operations. On the other hand, once you build it, the FAA says you have to let them come.
Yeah.
So if they're crowded in to to facilities with current dimensions, and you expand those facilities to alleviate the crowding for a combination of business and safety, reasons, is there anything to prevent the same crowding from happening at a greater level of traffic and activity?
Who owns the
Remember,
hangars?
what's that?
Who owns the hangars?
The county owns the
County
hangars,
owns them and leases them to the operators.
and yeah, but their use, critical aspects of their use are dictated by FAA regulations and grant assurances. And I'm not going to claim to be the expert about whether there's a way to thread that needle for the leases to contain limitations that would survive challenge, either to the FAA or by the FAA. But those are questions that I've seen no evidence that anyone is actively exploring, and it's scary.
Well,
Because at some point there's going to be a need to deal with some of those buildings. And if the groundwork hasn't been done, then I can easily see voices saying, hey, stop quibbling. We need, IBM needs a usable hangar. And, we don't want to lose IBM in Westchester. And the end result is perhaps a hangar that over time actually spurs airport expansion, despite protestations initially that that's not its purpose. But just
well, it
things to
doesn't
think
have
about.
to be an expansion. It just has to be a maintenance of the existing structure.
All right, so I was involved in a couple renovations to two hangars many years ago on a construction standpoint. And to me, it was the corporations were paying for it all. And I assume they went and got county permission to do that. So really, it's up to the users then to renovate the hangars as long as assuming they're structurally capable.
Yeah, and that's where the disconnect is, because this market is so lucrative. These operators are fighting us for the right to operate and expand their operations, and they're not maintaining their existing facilities.
Well, arguably, NetJets in particular is refraining because they have a pre-announced plan to lobby and have begun lobbying the county to give them permission to knock down those buildings and build larger, more modern ones.
So there's a collateral agenda.
Well, then the key question is then who's going to own those new buildings that get built? Are they looking for the county to pay for it, or are they going to pay for it? And if they pay for it, do they own it?
Well, I can tell.
I mean, it's a much more complicated issue than just saying they look like hell and they need to be renovated.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty confident when I say that there's nothing on the table that would result in ownership of any, of any structures on airport property passing from the county to anyone else. But that doesn't mean that in exchange for, say, NetJets doing all the doing all or much of the demolition and construction. And by the way, under the tarmac there's almost certainly high levels of PFAS and other contaminants. So there'd be a huge environmental mitigation project there, soil mitigation. But anyway, if at the end of the day, NetJets, as it claims it wants to do, pays for much or all of it, then at the very least, they certainly would expect a quite long-term lease to get a return on that investment. And then, again, what assurances or limitations?
It's a tenant improvement situation. So, yeah.
But,
it's
I
pretty
think
straightforward.
we've spent a lot of time here. If you guys think this would be a good topic for the group to commit the task force to investigate, write up something that explains what you see as the issue. I think that's the best way forward.
I don't think it's a good topic for the municipalities to weigh in on.
All right.
But we want to hit targets that come in strong from the municipal viewpoints.
Yeah, I don't disagree, Nick, but I want to give Peter and Michael a chance to make their
No,
case.
I think it's a digression. I just, was commenting on the disconnect there. That's all. I think you can allocate ownership and Nick, we do that all day, every day. But
Michael, it's like an office building. It's how the lease got written.
well, that's the point. But if you had a lucrative business in your office building, you wouldn't let it deteriorate that way.
Right, I agree. But who sees it? Your clients aren't seeing that hangar.
Except for the fact that you have such expensive equipment that you're storing there.
Look, when you guys do the tour, it's a question you can ask them while we're driving around. I will say though that at this point, that's what they told me as well last time I was there. That's where they get the bulk of their revenues from, is from those lease agreements with whoever clients they have in there. Because again, there is no direct declared tax dollars that goes into the airport's budget. I mean, they get some like grant funding too, but the bulk of their revenue comes from those lease agreements.
Okay. Look, I think we should call the meeting to a close, and anybody have an objection to that? No. And let's do the poll that Greg's going to distribute to figure out when we should meet to discuss Martha's paper. Everyone okay with that?
Yep.
Yes.
Well, actually, I'd like to amend that. We're not discussing Martha's paper. We're discussing Martha's paper relative to the format of the resolution that we're eventually going to put forward.
That's fair. Yeah.
Well, as well as at that point, also the next meeting will be that'll be our next meeting whenever as we get to this.
Okay.
Great.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Good
Good night,
night.
everyone.
Thank you.